The news from Guyana, the region and the world. Compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom and powered by DemeraraWaves.com.
The news comes to you with the compliments of Kentucky Fried Chicken KFC. With the news at this time, I'm Dennis Chabrol. Good evening. First, the highlights. The Alliance for Change believes that the opposition should sit on the board of the Natural Resources Fund, although it does not agree with the new legislation governing the oil money. The president says the local content law is not aimed at shutting out investors. And regionally, Trinidad and Tobago wants an independent investigation. Trinidad and Tobago's opposition, United National Congress, wants an independent investigation into the Coast Guard's shooting death of a Venezuelan toddler in a boat. The British Virgin Islands Labour Commissioner does not like the idea of multi-year work permits. And internationally, Canadian police have arrested several persons and seized several guns in connection with an anti-vaxxer protest. The details of these and other stories in a moment.
Hit to stand in lines? Don't worry. KFC has got you covered with their drive-thrus, which are open now from 9 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. at Movietown, Vlissingen Road, Mandela Avenue, Reading Hoop, Parika, and the Amazonia Mall. That's right, you can drive through at 6 of their 9 locations. Remember, their current opening hours are 9 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. Go on down and let your taste buds savor the spices today. KFC.
It's finger-licking good.
And now the news in detail. The Alliance for Change, AFC, says it is keen on nominating an expert to be a member of the board of the Natural Resources Fund to scrutinize spending of the oil money. The AFC and its coalition partner, a Partnership for National Unity, still maintain that the new NRF Act is badly structured and was rammed through the House despite calls for a consultation with the opposition and the civil society. But AFC leader Kemraj Ramchitan says it is important that the opposition makes an effort to nominate a competent and independent person to sit on the board to see how the oil revenue will be spent.
Good politicians that like good governance will then realize that although we oppose the act, it doesn't necessarily mean that the contents of the act cannot be as best as possible be fulfilled. And so although we have been in opposition and very vociferous opposition against this new act of 2021, that does not necessarily mean that if all things being equal, as you said, we are given an opportunity to nominate a competent, capable person, we will not do that. I think it will be bad politics on our part, and it will be not in the exercise of your right to go towards good governance.
AFC General Secretary David Patterson and Executive Member Kathy Hughes say it is important to see how the more than $600 million that have been withdrawn from the Natural Resources Fund will be spent.
The AFC is not willing to give up the very important role of scrutinizing how Guyana's monies are spent. We have a responsibility to ensure we can scrutinize, regardless of the way we may be treated or how we come to the table. But primarily, we have to make sure that that money is put to good use, because it belongs to each and every Guyanese.
AFC Executive Member Kathy Hughes. The Alliance for Change, AFC, wants the bipartisan Parliamentary Constitutional Reform Committee to discuss the possibility of power sharing. AFC leader Kemraj Ramchitan also wants the issue to be discussed among political parties and other stakeholders. He says that the APNU-AFC administration had sought to involve non-governmental actors in national decision-making through the Natural Resource Fund Act.
It should go in both areas, and as a matter of fact, even stakeholder consultations all across. And that is one of the reasons why in our act, we put in 22 civilians to be the Transparency and Oversight Committee. Because in Guyana, a lot of civil society shy away from governance. And this was now a brand new fund that was going to be 10 times more than one revenue stream and so on will bring in about 5 years, the regular taxation and so on. And we wanted them to have a big handle on it. Not this 5-man committee, 4 of which would be appointed by the president. We wanted to bring in the civil society to ensure that they have this oversight and lots more than the oversight, because we feel that that is a form of power sharing.
Mr. Ramchadan made known his position in the wake of a democracy and governance assessment prepared for the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, saying that Guyana's 2 major political parties need to engage in power sharing. The 2021 assessment says the People's Progressive Party and the Partnership for National Unity need to move away from the current winner-take-all system. The U.S. aid-funded report states that power sharing will ensure that the unprecedented wealth and oil reserves can be transparently and equitably managed for the benefit of all Guyanese. According to the assessment, the National Assembly, a possible mechanism for initiating reform discussions and formalizing power sharing, has been combative at best. President Irfan Ali is assuring foreign investors that Guyana's local content legislation is not aimed at shutting out foreign investors. He was Monday morning addressing the opening of Baker Hughes' office at Landliff Canaan, East Bank, Demerara.
The local content legislation is not meant in any way to displace anyone. It is not meant in any way to lock out any investor. It is not meant in any way to minimize foreign direct investment. It is not meant in any way to minimize global investment and footprint in Guyana. To do so will be foolish. To do so will be working in isolation of what the rest of the world is.
The president's assurance has come against the backdrop of concerns by the Caribbean private sector organization and some extra-regional companies that local content legislation is protectionist. The Guyana Water Incorporated GWI says it is examining possible sites to construct a water treatment plant on Leguan, an island in the Essequibo River. The utility company says the new plant will be one of 5 along the coast to be constructed by GWI with funding from the Caribbean Development Bank CDB. Neighborhood Democratic Council Chairman Lachman Dwarka, as well as Leguan's Regional Democratic Council Representative Sheikh Ayub, both welcomed the construction of the plant. The officials praised the GWI and the government for bringing treated water to Wakinam. They took the opportunity to also highlight that the island's water pressure is excellent. And in news just coming to hand, 2 men will be charged tomorrow with the murder of a woman at Soesdijk, East Bank, Demerara. The men, allegedly, according to investigators, faked the suicide, but according to the police, the men struck the woman unconscious because she was seen in an uncompromising position with another man. When the men allegedly realized that the woman was unconscious, they then hung her in a mango tree to give the impression that she had taken her own life. And now, in news from the Caribbean. Trinidad and Tobago's opposition United National Congress UNC wants an independent investigation into the Coast Guard's shooting death of a Venezuelan toddler. The incident occurred earlier this month in Trinidad and Tobago waters. The Coast Guard says that it was forced to open fire after the captain refused to stop and instead attempted to ram the Coast Guard vessel. The illegal boat was transporting a number of Venezuelans from Venezuela to Trinidad when the incident occurred. More in this report from CNC3 News.
The Prime Minister has made a few public statements on the Coast Guard's actions following the 1-year-old's death, with the Prime Minister saying the Coast Guard were merely protecting themselves and the country and that the child's death was an accident.
Is that a fact? Do we know that? How do we know that?
Senator Roberts says the Prime Minister is making definitive statements while an investigation is being done. That investigation is being spearheaded by the Coast Guard. But the UNC has very little confidence in that.
Really? The Coast Guard is going to investigate the Coast Guard?
The UNC believes this reeks of a cover-up and says the action of the state to return the other Venezuelan nationals on the boat proves that.
How can you have an investigation without eyewitness accounts? You are sending a mountain of evidence back to Venezuela?
It's why the senator wants an independent investigation. He said the world is now looking at how Trinidad and Tobago treats with this matter. And while the Prime Minister sounds certain of the events, the UNC is seeing some inconsistencies. For example, was the Coast Guard's thermal imaging system used at the time?
You would have also seen, Elvis, a little baby, would have given a tiny thermal image.
And the party wants to know why a Coast Guard vessel felt threatened by a pirogue, even if it was trying to ram them, as they say.
They were in a military-grade light craft, so therefore, to be rammed, these boats are designed to be rammed.
Now, the Coast Guard addressed that on February 6th, saying that the vessel they were in at the time was smaller than the Venezuelan's pirogue. Meanwhile, Senator Roberts wants the Prime Minister to know that what happened is a big deal, and that should be his focus right now, instead of the opposition leader.
Suriname is set to get another tranche of money from the International Monetary Fund, IMF. The IMF and the Surinamese government have reached a staff-level agreement on the first evaluation of the Economic Recovery Program. Star News reports that the deal has yet to be approved by the IMF's Board of Directors. Finance and Planning Minister Armand Achabar Singh says that he is not afraid of the outcome of the evaluation. IMF board approval means a second tranche of the $690 million loan will be made available in March. In December, the first tranche of $56.4 million was deposited into the account of the Central Bank of Suriname. In a statement, the IMF said Suriname's economic program remains on track, meeting key quantitative targets and making continued progress on an ambitious set of reforms. The IMF says economic stabilization and recovery are underway, and both fiscal and external balances are improving. The government's economic policy aims to build on its fiscal consolidation efforts while increasing social spending, promoting debt restructuring, talks with creditors, and other achievements. The IMF says the policy also seeks to strengthen the new monetary policy framework, addressing the vulnerabilities of the banking sector and further addressing money laundering, corruption, and other governance shortcomings. In Barbados, the Hotel and Tourism Association is welcoming the end of the COVID curfew as well as an ease in other restrictions. The government in Bridgetown says the decisions have been made based on purely science of the virus. More on this report from Barbados Today.
Government is getting the thumbs up for its decision to lift the curfew and ease restrictions starting today. At the weekend, Health Minister Ian Gooding-Edgell announced that pleasure craft boats and party cruises will be allowed to operate. Hikes will resume, and there will be no restriction on beach activities and parks, among other things. Chairman of the Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association, Renee Copping, says direct tourism service providers, including catamarans, nightclubs, and tour companies, are delighted to be able to return to full capacity. And restaurants are also happy with the move so that they can extend their hours of operation. Meanwhile, the head of the COVID-19 monitoring unit, Ronald Chapman, has assured the public that the unit will continue to ensure a safe environment for all. At a weekend COVID-19 press conference update, Chapman urged Barbadians to act wisely and to use good judgment to keep COVID-19 cases low and to ensure a further reduction in restrictions.
We will continue to move deliberately. We will continue to move slowly, incrementally, to ensure that we reduce the level of, that we increase the freedoms or reduce the level of restrictions while ensuring a safe environment. We all welcome these eases. We all welcome a gradual return to the norm. And as we continue as a people to follow the protocols, to act wisely, and as the Prime Minister would say, to lend our hearts to wisdom, we will see a further falling of the cases, and we will also see further reduction of the restrictions.
Meanwhile, Chief Medical Officer, the Most Honorable Kenneth George, reported a 19% reduction in new COVID-19 infections over the last week in comparison with the last 7-day period.
That report from Barbados Today. The British Virgin Islands Labour Commissioner Michelle McLean has suggested that multi-year work permits for foreign workers may put locals at a disadvantage in the workforce, while acknowledging in a recent virtual stakeholders meeting that there are provisions currently in the Labour Code to implement 3-year work permits. McLean was hesitant about using this as an across-the-board measure to alleviate the significant backlog faced by her department. BVI News reports that a Labour commissioner says a foreigner may be granted a 3-year work permit, but a BVI national may want to return home but will not be able to get a specific job being held by a foreigner on a work permit. McLean told the stakeholders that she felt there couldn't be a blanket approach to addressing the particular challenge of processing work permits quickly. She said a clause may need to be implemented to somehow push the Labour Department to process permits in a workable time frame. Meanwhile, Labour Minister Vincent Wheatley says he is in agreement with the Labour Commissioner on the matter and shared her concerns. The Labour Department has come in for considerable flack over the last few months from months-long delays in renewing work permits and approving new ones. A new system that allows for online work permit applications to be processed has been riddled with challenges since its implementation. This has been cited as the main reason for the backlog. The Labour Commissioner also argued that a new system required duplication of efforts on the part of an already severely short-staffed department. And now we go to the BBC World Service for the latest bulletin of international news.
BBC News with Sue Montgomery. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has declared Wednesday a day of national unity after US intelligence suggested that could be when Russian forces attack. In a defiant address to the nation, Mr. Zelensky said Ukraine wanted peace but was ready to fight for freedom. The United States has announced it's moving its embassy staff away from the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, to Lviv in the west of the country. Russia denies planning to invade. John Kirby is the spokesman for the Pentagon.
Even over the last 24 to 48, over the course of the weekend, Mr. Putin has added military capability along that border with Ukraine and in Belarus. He is exercising some of his units on the ground there in the south, as well as naval units in the Black Sea. So he continues to add to his readiness. He continues to give himself more options should he pursue a military path here.
Police in the Canadian province of Alberta say they've arrested 11 protesters and confiscated several firearms after raiding a protest blocking a border crossing with the United States. Officers said they'd searched 3 trailers at the demonstration against COVID rules. Our correspondent Samira Hussain is following developments.
What the police force in Alberta have said is that they have reason to believe that there was almost a dozen people who, using some long guns and handguns, they were going to try and protect, so to speak, the protesters against any police moving in to try and remove the protesters. And so police went in and they seized those guns, and those individuals have been arrested. A lot of these protests, especially along the border, are going to have some lasting impacts to see how vulnerable some of these border areas are.
A former Goldman Sachs banker has gone on trial in New York, accused of laundering money from a multi-billion-dollar Malaysian investment fund known as 1MDB. Prosecutors say Roger Ng sought to earn millions by helping divert money that was supposed to be used for the Malaysian economy. He's pleaded not guilty. Michelle Fleury is in New York.
He is the sole individual who will actually stand trial in what is considered one of the biggest financial frauds ever to take place on Wall Street. $6 billion worth of bonds was raised for 1MDB about a decade ago. There were bribes involved, and a lot of the funds were diverted and sort of spent on luxury parties and toys around the globe.
Doctors in Sudan say 2 protesters have been shot dead by security forces today, taking the number killed since October's coup to at least 80. The latest pro-democracy demonstrations have been taking place as people reject military rule and call for the release of recently arrested politicians. Since last week, 3 people who'd once been in the ruling Sovereign Council have been detained. BBC News. A study of rivers around the world has found potentially toxic levels of pharmaceutical drugs in a quarter of them. Researchers took samples from more than 250 rivers. Drugs used to treat epilepsy and diabetes were the most widely found, at 2/3 of test sites. Rivers on every continent, including Antarctica, contained paracetamol, nicotine and caffeine. John Wilkinson from the University of York in the UK led the study.
These drugs are designed to elicit a biological effect. So the same mechanisms that they act on in our bodies are conserved in organisms that live in the rivers. So these effects can range from endocrine disruption affecting the reproductive success of fish, all the way to bacteria becoming resistant to some of the medicines we use to treat things like infection.
A federal hate crimes trial has begun in the US for the 3 white men convicted of killing a black jogger in February 2020. Ahmaud Arbery was chased and then shot as he exercised in a neighbourhood in southern Georgia. The jury will decide whether racial bias was a factor in his killing. In a state trial that sentenced them to life in prison for murder, the defendants argued they thought Mr. Arbery was running away after committing a crime, despite having no evidence. Naftali Bennett has arrived in Bahrain on the first official visit to the Gulf Kingdom by an Israeli Prime Minister. He's meeting members of the ruling monarchy, including the Crown Prince and Prime Minister Salman bin Al Khalifa. Bahrain normalised diplomatic relations with Israel in 2020. The U.S. Department of Agriculture says its suspension of all imports of avocados from Mexico will continue for as long as necessary until the safety of American inspectors is guaranteed. On Saturday, Washington stopped the trade, saying inspectors working in Mexico were verbally threatened. BBC News.
And that's the end of the news.
With immediate effect, KFC's Vlissingen Road drive-thru will be open up to 1 a.m. all week. The Movie Town drive-thru will be open up to 1 a.m. on weekends and midnight Monday to Thursday. The Mandela Avenue drive-thru will be open until 1 a.m. on weekends and 11 p.m. Monday to Thursday. New opening times for KFC's drive-thrus at Vlissingen Road, Movie Town and Mandela Avenue.
Now for a recap of the highlights. The Alliance for Change believes that the opposition should sit on the board of the Natural Resources Fund, although it does not agree with the new legislation governing the oil money. The president says the local content law is not aimed at shutting out investors. Regionally, Trinidad and Tobago wants an independent investigation into the Coast Guard's shooting death of a Venezuelan toddler in a boat. The British Virgin Islands Labour Commissioner does not like the idea of multi-year work permits. And internationally, Canadian police have arrested several persons and seized several guns in connection with an anti-vaxxer protest. The news came to you with the compliments of Kentucky Fried Chicken, KFC.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves. For the toughest jobs, there's only one original motor oil, Valvoline, powering the world's heavy-duty engines in every corner of the world. You can trust the super protection of the original to keep your business moving forward. Valvoline, the original that never stops improving. Distributed by Swiss Machinery, Eccles Public Road. Telephone 233-3821 or 2495 or WhatsApp 691-1732.